Bienvenidos and welcome to Common Table Conversations. My name is Jesse Rincones, Executive Director of the Hispanic Baptist Convention of Texas, and I get the joy of being your host today. The Common Table Collaborative's guiding mission is to build friendship among people like us who are interested in the important topic of clergy and congregational well-being. Today, we will hear from Martin Lee. Martin is a PhD student in clinical psychology at Fuller Theological Seminary, and his research interests include research on clergy, spirituality, mindfulness, and self-compassion. So to get started today, I'll welcome Martin.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, everyone. It's been truly an honor to be here to share with you. And I have always had a burden for the clergy's well-being, and knowing that there's a community sharing this same vision, and I feel inspired and encouraged. And today is indeed a humble experience to share my research at the Common Table. I'm grateful for Ted's invitation and this opportunity to contribute my teaching to the community. And I also want to acknowledge my advisor, Dr. Joy Fahn's tremendous support on my research journey. So I'm gonna share the slides. So before coming to Fuller, I was a full-time youth pastor in a Baptist church in Taiwan. So my son was born during my first year of ministry, and being new parents, my wife and I struggled to navigate family and ministry responsibilities. I remember one time a teenager in my congregation called me at the midnight for help because he had a fight with his father and got kicked out of the house. And I was feeding my 2-month-old son at that time. I handed my son over to my wife and left home to handle the crisis immediately. And this is just one of many incidents that got me interested in the research topic I'm about to share with you. Today, my topic is clergy, work-family conflict, psychological distress, and well-being. So clergy vocation is rewarding, but it comes with many unique stressors. The 24/7 work hour natures and the blurred line between work and family life, and the fishbowl experience, and also the unrealistic expectation and criticism, and all yield a great deal of chronic and acute stress. So indeed, research showed that perpetual stress might lead to a clergy health crisis, such as obesity, chronic diseases, higher depression and anxiety rate, and burnout. So my research focused on the impact of work-family conflict on psychological distress and well-being. Work-family conflict is a well-studied topic in the occupational psychology field. And the classic definition by Greenhouse and Butel is a form of inter-role conflict in which the role pressure from the work and family domains are mutually incompatible in some respect. So think back to my personal story when my student called my role as a father and a pastor became incompatible. So work-family conflict is a stressor or impact from one domain spilled over to another. And researcher further breaks down 4 types of work-family conflict. As you can see in the table, the directionality indicates the direction in those impacts spilling over to another. Work-to-family conflict is stressor or responsibility from work that impact family life. And family-to-work conflict is the reverse direction. And form of work-family conflict is the nature of the impact. Here we have time and strain. So by combining directionality and forms, we got 4 types of work-family conflicts. First, time-based work-to-family conflict. Example could be having to miss out a family dinner due to a hospital visit of a congregant. A second type of work-family conflict is time-based family-to-work conflict. So having to miss a meeting or training opportunity due to family responsibility or childcare. So again, a time-based work-family conflict is due to us not being able to be in 2 places at one time. Third, strain-based work-to-family conflict. For example, you can't do chores after an emotionally drained workday, right? Can we? And the fourth, strength-based family conflicts, such as emotionally preoccupied at work due to family matters. Like my daughter has been coughing a lot lately at night. I didn't have good sleep, and that impact my work energy as well. So strength-based work-family conflict is due to our limited energy level to navigate between different roles. So I want to investigate how work-family conflict, especially different types of work-family conflict, is related to psychological distress and well-being. I chose 3 psychological distress indicators. So burnout consists of 3 components: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, which is treating other people at work as an object. It's a cynical attitude, and low personal achievement. And I believe we are all probably all familiar with anxiety and depression. And in terms of well-being indicators, I chose life satisfaction, which is how much a person is subjectively satisfied with one's life. And second is a clergy spiritual well-being skill developed by Dr. Proscott Bell. And I'm thrilled that she's in this meeting as well. It's really an honor to build my work on top of hers. And the third indicator is flourishing, which is feeling a sense of purpose, meaning, goals, and self-efficacy in life. I know it's kind of complicated, but I hypothesize that different types of work-family conflict could have different impact on psychological distress and well-being. So as you can see in this model, 4 types of work-family conflicts are on the left, and psychological distress is loaded on the 3 indicators: burnout, anxiety, and depression. And well-being is loaded on life satisfaction, spiritual well-being, and flourishing. So a survey invitation was sent through an alumni association of an evangelical seminary in Taiwan, and the sample size is 336 participants. And here is the demographic of the sample, and I won't go into the detail. So this is the overview of my study, and now we're gonna enter in the breakout session. So in this, I would want to invite you to discuss what are the top 3 stressors you experienced as a clergy, therapist, or researchers. And if you have time, you can do the second one, but I believe probably the first one could take up most of your time.
Thank you, Martin. And just a reminder to our groups as we break out, consider the following question to guide your discussion. What are the top 3 stressors you experienced as a clergy person, a therapist, or a researcher?
Welcome back. And I believe you all had a fruitful conversation. In this session, I will share the findings of my study, and then we'll have another breakout session, and then I'll talk about the implications based on this. So regarding the discrepancy statistics, the data show that 15.5% of my clergy sample experienced moderate to severe level of depression. And the 2019 depression prevalence rate in Taiwan is 8.9. So it's higher than the prevalence. And 9.5% report severe anxiety, and 22% report higher emotional exhaustion, and 23% reported low personal achievement, and 8% reported high depersonalization. So overall, data show that depression is higher than the prevalence, and about 1/4 of the clergy in my sample experienced some burnout symptoms. Regarding the well-being indicator, 35% reported they are satisfied with their current life, and 43% report that they often experience a sense of meaning and purpose in life, and 59% reported that they often experience God's presence and power. And I find the discrepancy pretty interesting. So the data suggests that people can be dissatisfied with their life, but still experience God's presence and power in their life. And that's pretty interesting. And overall, the data show that a high endorsement of spiritual well-being, and followed by flourishing, and then life satisfaction. The result also shows some demographic that impact the clergy's well-being. So the first one is age. So the data showed that older clergy reported lower level of work-family conflict, burnout, and higher levels of spiritual well-being comparing to younger clergy. So, so older clergy experience higher level of well-being than younger clergy. And then gender, female clergy reported higher anxiety level than male clergy. This is also tied to, I think, probably also Taiwanese context as well. I will talk about it more. And then marital status, married clergy endorsed higher time-based family to work conflict, life satisfaction. And on the other hand, single clergy experienced higher work to family conflict, anxiety, and burnout. So like marital status itself is a protective factor, like married clergy experience higher well-being and single clergy experience higher psychological distress. Furthermore, clergy with above average income reported higher level of well-being, even spiritual well-being. So it is likely that having a sufficient salary can reduce financial distress and increase well-being. On the other hand, clergy with below average income present a higher work-family conflict, burnout, and anxiety. Lastly, clergy who work alone compared to those who work in a pastoral team reported higher level of depression. And I think that's kind of fit our common sense. So I will talk about some implication based on these findings later. So in terms of the main analysis, please don't worry about the number and asterisks. As you can see in the figure, psychological distress is loaded on burnout, anxiety, and depression. And well-being is loaded on life satisfaction, spiritual well-being, and flourishing. So when we investigated the 4 types of work-family conflict and their relationship with psychological distress and well-being, we found that only strand-based work-family conflict, not time-based one, were related to psychological distress and well-being. So people who experience higher levels of strand-based work-family conflict report higher levels of distress and lower levels of well-being. So it is possible that the time-based work-family conflict is more explicit, therefore easier to adopt. For example, your son's birthday happens to be on Sunday when you are the busiest, but you can celebrate it on Saturday night when you normally are at home. However, strand-based work-family conflict is harder to measure and quantify, and it takes training and self-awareness to one's emotional states, and it is much covert. So this is the kind of the result of the main analysis, and we're gonna enter into another breakout session. And so we found out only strand-based, not time-based work-family conflict were related to psychological distress and well-being. So what strategies have you found helpful in coping with strand-based work-family conflict?
As you begin to prepare to go into your breakout rooms, again, consider the discussion question. Were you surprised by any of these findings? And what strategies have you found helpful in coping with strand-based work-family conflict? Off to our breakout rooms we go.
And Martin, before we head out, I see that Latasha is asking in the chat, can we redefine strain-based conflict? So will you give us that one more time?
Yeah, so it's like, because we have a limit energy level, so we can find it incompatible to fulfill both roles as in our work and in our family. So we have limited strength. So for example, if you are tired from ministry, you cannot do chore at home because of that energy limitation. You are incompatible. You cannot fulfill both roles. That's the conflict. Okay, so I hope you had a great conversation, and I will go back to the demographic part just to clarify things a little bit. So my sample is from Taiwan. So the sample size is 336, and age is from 24 to 75, and years in ministry ranging from 1 to 40 years. And there are like more than 21 denominations. And the gender is 56% female and 73% married, and 80% work in church and 20% worked in parachurch. And church size, most of them, 65% work in church below 200 congregants, and 17% of clergy work in mega church, like more than 1,000 people. So I am going to share some implication based on my finding. So my study showed that work-family conflict is a risk factor for psychological distress and well-being. So it impacts depression, anxiety, burnout, as well as life satisfaction, flourishing, and spiritual well-being among clergy. And specifically, we found that it is the strand-based work-family conflict, not the time-based work-family conflict, that is associated with well-being. So therefore, it is important for clergy personnel to learn a habit of monitoring strand-based work-family conflict, not only the time-based work-family conflict. So for example, we usually look at the calendar and arrange our work and family responsibility. And we ask ourselves, do I have time to do this? And we tend to pack our schedule as long as things are not in conflict, because we are passionate about our work, right? And we want to do work for God's kingdom. We want the church, want the best for the church. So we try to pack our schedule. However, we seldom ask ourselves when scheduling, do I have the strength and the energy to do this? So in other words, no conflicts in scheduling does not mean no conflicts on the energy level or the strength level. Therefore, my study highlighted the importance of self-awareness. Clergy could train themselves to be more mindful of their emotional and physiological state, so they can spot the warning sign in time and cope with it. And clergy could also learn to sort of extend God's grace not only to people they serve, but also to themselves. So preach the gospel to themselves and give themselves the tenderness and grace in balancing ministry and family demands. Also, it will be helpful for clergy personnel to know themselves in terms of what consumes more energy for them. For example, some people might find sermon preparation extremely exhausting while visiting a congregant at the hospital. So people got different reaction to different ministry roles or activities. So then the clergy can adjust their day accordingly. If they have the they have to give a sermon that tend to drain this clergy personnel, he might need more rest on that day, as opposed to he probably can have back-to-back scheduling in terms of hospital visits. So it's know yourself and try to arrange your activities based on that. And also daily mini sabbath, such as prayers, power nap, coffee break, office stretch, and other self-care activities, exercise, eating healthy might also be beneficial. So those were some of implication on a personal level. And on a structural level, the church or organization can think of ways to increase work-family enrichment. That means increase the positive spillover instead of the negative one between family and work domain. So for example, if a church values the importance of cultivating healthy and thriving family or keeping a Sabbath, then clergy personnel might feel that they have permission to spend more time with their family and have permission to have a break and rest. So the church is the overall culture is encouraging a balance between work and family. So that's enrichment. On the other hand, clergy family can think of a way to better support the clergy personnel in their ministry role. So the enrichment starts from the family side and try to support and enrich the person's role from another domain. So that is work-family enrichment. And we do need more research on that as well. Moreover, the demographic finding shows that older clergy report lower burnout and spiritual well-being. So I think there must be lots of wisdom of the clergy. So I think it also highlights the importance of mentorship. And also single clergy, female clergy, and clergy who work alone might need extra support. So on the structural side, from denomination or like the broader organization side, can think of ways to support those demographics. In terms of clinical implication, we encourage clinicians to be culturally sensitive to clergy's unique work family style. It's not easy to just say, why don't you set a boundary, right? It's just not realistic. So it might not be easy to maintain a clear work family boundary. So helping clients find realistic and doable ways to maintain some healthy work family boundary and might be beneficial. Moreover, we also suggest clinicians paying attention to the clergy's strand-based work-family conflict in conceptualizing the cases and treatment planning. Moreover, we also encourage the clinician to help clergy client increase self-awareness, particularly in the inner emotional state, and encourage emotional expression and teaching coping skills to strand-based work-family conflict. Lastly, I want to bring up the intricate relationship between one's mental health and spiritual well-being. So I know this table is technical, so please don't worry about anything else other than the highlights. So the highlight indicates that higher spiritual well-being was related to lower work-family conflict, anxiety, burnout, depression, and higher level of satisfaction and flourishing. So spiritual well-being is intricately related to mental health. So therefore, it is super spiritual for clergy personnel to take care of themselves mentally. Moreover, it is also very spiritual for clinicians to advocate for and support clergy's mental health. This is my presentation, and thank you for listening. Here are the references.
Thank you so much, Martin. We now have an opportunity to share comments or questions either in the chat or by using your raise your hand function. And I get the opportunity to kick us off with a couple of questions. Martin, in the paper that you wrote, you noted that clergy in Taiwan may face additional barriers in the form of cultural challenges. And so what are some of the cross-cultural observations that you've seen that regarding clergy well-being?
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. Because in Taiwan, like mental health still have like a lot of stigmatized, like in the general stigma in general society, and in the church context, like that role model view of clergy is like pretty high. So people are expecting clergy to be perfect, to be Superman and Superwoman, and expect them not to make a mistake and be the spiritual role model for the whole church. So that add on more like isolation on the clergy population because they cannot be vulnerable to their congregants. And also a lot of clergy live in a rectory in Taiwan. That's a huge percentage. So can you imagine like work family boundary? It's like you pretty much live in the church, right? And like your congregant can knock the door, can ring the doorbell. And when you take out the trash, you will see your congregants. It's like unending blending of work and family. It's like your congregants are everywhere. So that put on like extra stressors on them, of course. And a lot of churches in Taiwan are small size, so they work alone. So a lot of churches, they only have one clergy personnel. So that's another layer of challenges as well. And for the female clergy, because in Taiwan, I think that patriarchal culture is still very prominent. So like female has this expectation from the society to take care of the children and the family matters. So that's why I think that's probably explains why the female clergy might experience higher anxiety level than the male clergy. But that's just it's just my guess. It's not like I don't have evidence for that, but it's just it makes sense to me. Yeah.
Thank you. One question in the chat is, could you talk about the implications of the finding you noted in that those who work alone versus those who work in teams experience worse outcomes, and how might we support those in smaller congregations and those in rural settings?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where the organization or denomination can have leverage on. It's like how to structurally support that. Like in Taiwan, I know like some denomination has like this retreat for smaller church clergy like annually, and just give them like a time to rest and in a really nice hotel, and then give them like good food and just give them some break time just to let them catch a break. I think that could just one of the many examples. And by my like based on my finding, clergy who work alone experience higher depression level, but that does not mean that they have depression. It's just comparing two groups. So it doesn't mean that those clergy who work alone are having like psychopathology as depression. No, it's just like they tend to feel alone more, and that makes sense to us, right? So that's something I can think of. But I think it really depends on the denomination and the different contexts, and finding different ways to have that support for those clergy who work alone. It's worth thinking. Yeah.
Okay. Well, a couple of people have asked about the impact of a collectivist culture, if that makes it more difficult on the strain conflict.
Yeah, definitely. I really want to talk about that more, but I didn't include like cultural measures in my study. So I cannot have like evidence to talk about it. So that's something I can do in the future, the future directions. I want to know like the self-construct, like the concept of individualistic and collectivistic, and how that impact one's social relationship, and then how that impact their view of self, and then how they schedule and relating to like emotional expression and things like that. So that's on my radar, because I didn't include that in the survey, so I couldn't talk about it based on research. Yeah, but there are definitely like impact, because work-family conflict is like a well-studied construct in the occupational or industrial psychology. So there are a lot of cross-cultural comparison on the field in terms of different occupation, like nurses, physicians, teachers, all that. But they are not much in the clergy population. And that's why I want to do this. I want to do a diverse sample, and I got it from Taiwan. But in the future, I can do like cross-cultural comparisons. So that's what I'm hoping to do. Yeah.
We look forward to seeing the results of that research. Looks like we got a lot of power nappers in our
That's great. Have more.
Any other questions?
The slide, you don't have to put it back up, but the slide that had the mention on it of the 3
Indicators.
Yeah. What was the first one?
Life satisfaction.
Life satisfaction. And then the third one?
It's spiritual well-being.
So where you talked about the discrepancy.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Between the life satisfaction and people's ability to experience God.
Yeah.
And his presence. It triggered in me, I wonder how that speaks to what I would consider kind of a well-rounded theology of suffering.
Yeah.
That would have to do with, looking at human suffering upon ourselves, not just out there, but upon ourselves, even as pastors, as a reality.
Yeah.
And in the lens that, for me personally, in my opinion, that there is just about no deeper spirituality than reality.
Yeah.
And I come from a Pentecostal charismatic viewpoint and perspective as well, where a lot of my pastoral colleagues want to look past the suffering to the glory,
or
the victory, and not talk much about suffering. So I wonder what your thought would be on just kind of that connection of
I actually had a similar thought, like, because life satisfaction is more like hedonic aspect of well-being. It's like, do I have good food, good vacation, good quality of life that's, like more hedonic, right? But spiritual well-being and like flourishing is more about meaning and goal. It's not so much about like your environment or like more, down to earth things. So I think that result really give me that impression that too, like clergy can suffer and still find meanings in their work and also still experience God's presence and power. Yeah.
Thank you.
I resonate
Appreciate
with
it.
your sharing a lot
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
I find that overall in my work with pastors, that resilient, that even connects to a pastor's resilience.
Yeah.
That kind of the more well-rounded the theology of suffering for an individual pastor,
Yeah.
that it builds a certain resiliency to get through the suffering that every pastor will endure. So, thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Martin, I'm curious. I do retreats with pastors and their spouses, and often the spouse, when we do a burnout inventory, shows higher burnout than the pastor.
Yeah.
Have you got any comment about that?
Yeah. I thought about including the family members, especially the spouse, in the study, but I ended up not getting, and I did it, but I ended up not getting enough sample size to do analysis. Yeah, so probably they are too burnout to fill up the survey. Yeah, but I think definitely like the family and the spouse factors, we need to know more, because based on my personal experience, I do know that like when a clergy personnel like engage in the ministry wholeheartedly, there are a lot of other things need to be taken care of by the spouse. And yeah, so that's definitely something we can do more research on in the future. Yeah,
I think if we're looking at resiliency in the life of a pastor, if we can make sure that the family is taken care of, it's going to help. The relationship with the spouse. So making it a priority.
Yeah.
Because it's going to help us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I found that marital status is like protective factors to well-being too, right? So how do we strengthen that relationship and provide resources for clergy, family, and marriages are also pretty crucial. Yeah.
The question here is, would you attribute the work-family conflict dynamics in the younger families hindering the leadership pipelines in congregations or denominations from growing younger? So she says, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but basically what she's asking here is if you'd attribute the work-family conflict dynamics in younger families actually hindering leadership pipelines for future clergy.
That's a good observation. Yeah. I think that speaks to the like challenging nature of ministry, and also I think a lot of that challenging, you don't really know it until you really enter it. So I think for like we have less clergy in this country, probably might due to, I don't know, a lot like the decline in the like Protestant or evangelical community, more than like the psychological distress that hindered them from doing this.
And I wonder if in some ways maybe you mentioned that if this is the role model that someone is seeing, it's like this is what it means to be a clergy person, and their role model for that is a person who is burnout. That's not a great advertisement. I remember Greg Jones, he once said that an honest advertisement for for ministry might read overwork and manage conflict and so slow decline for very little pay. Who's interested? Who will join? And oftentimes, I think that many people, even one person I was talking with in the chat earlier, she was talking about how the machinery of the church just burnt them out. And so, I think, it's true that the implications of that is not just for the individual, but it could also be for those that follow that individual too.
Yeah, I like you raised like the example of like sort of like the advertisement the church give to young people. Yeah. You really need like a systemic change.
That's great.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Dr. Ken Eichler, I know he's been waving at me, and we want to make sure that he gets an opportunity to share.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in just hearing people discuss the options for clergy care of doing some scheduling adjustments and setting up some boundaries, I would be very interested to know, Martin, how many of your clergy were lead pastors as opposed to staff pastors, because as you know, if you're a staff pastor on a team, the lead pastor can set your schedule and have expectations, and also a board, your church board. So you might think, oh, I could adjust my schedule, but they're saying, unless you do these things, you're not going to continue to minister at this church. And so there's this situation about schedules and also about boundaries, because you can't always set up boundaries to those that are your supervisors or the positions of authority in your church. And so I was just curious, in your research, how many of those clergy were lead pastors, or how many were staff pastors?
Yeah, good question. I did collect that, and I cannot think of the numbers right now. Yeah, but I think your question made me think of my study showed that younger clergy show higher burnout rate and also higher work-family conflict. And one of my explanation might be that because younger clergy tend to be a staff pastor instead of a lead pastor, so they might not have that authority to schedule their time, their day, their ministry. And also like their family might be younger, their children might be younger. So a lot of that factors are played there. But you are definitely right. Like we cannot just change our schedule like that, right? We have to work with the church as a whole. So definitely
the thing that also plays into that is the younger clergy have a tendency to pastor our smaller churches, because they're taking these kinds of assignments to learn how to pastor and hold greater responsibility. And within that, then they're required to do many more things than they at times would want to do. But as most of us know, crisis doesn't happen conveniently.
Yeah.
And so when your congregants get into crisis situations, they're going to reach out to you. And for you to say, well, I'm not going to go and meet with anybody on a Saturday when somebody's in a hospital in a life-threatening situation or in a severe crisis, those things don't happen like that.
Yeah, good point.
Well, great conversations at the table.